Cisco.
Yeah, one quick thing for you. So we're doing a live stream of this for the residents that can't make it down here. So in order for it to pick you up, just make sure you're talking into a mic. I'm sure you're used to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to wear this at all? Are you going to?
I think I'm gonna go this way.
This guy?
Okay.
I find these uncomfortable.
They're not the greatest. Yeah, they don't stay around your ear very well.
They always have the front.
Sure. Take it away. All right.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to University House Wallingford. Can you hear me okay? Good. We are so happy that you are here today. We, the last year, or actually 2.5 years, we've had a lot of wonderful events here at University House. But okay, good. So the last couple, 2.5 years during the pandemic, we've had a lot of events on Zoom and not live event. This is the first live event that we've had since the pandemic here at University House. And we figured what would be the best event to have when we have this live event is to have the most positive person on the planet to be with us today. Yeah. And we are so honored to have him here, our distinguished speaker, our illustrious speaker, and not only is Cisco Morris noted here in the local area, in our regional area, on the national scene, and even on the international scene. His books have been the best-selling books in the country, and he has been really all over talking about his passion and his love of gardening. And today we're honored to have him here. We are just going to ask you a couple things, is to leave your mask on while you're here in the community. And then after the community, after the speaker, we are going to give like a mini tour of the University House, which you're welcome to join us. So now is the moment that we're all waiting for, and I'd like to welcome you, Mr. Morris, to University House Wallingford, a good friend of University House Wallingford, too. Thank you.
Oh la la! So, can you all hear me okay? Oh, great. Well, thanks a lot for coming out, and it sure is fun to be out doing things again. So, this is really great. So, just to let you know how this is going to work, I'm going to give away all but one of these potted plants that are up here on this table, and I have my special way I give it away. You have to solve, if you're the lucky person that gets chosen out of the audience, you have to solve my tough Cisco Garden Stumper question. These questions are so hard, they throw people into tizzies of nervous anxiety. Even though I've never stumped anyone, I know why. It's because I give 2 tries on true and false. So today could be the day. So I'll be giving away some cool plants here and a couple of tools too. So I think this will be a lot of fun. And at the end, I'm giving away one of my new books. It's called Oh La La, and I'll tell you about that when I give it away, and whoever gets it will get it signed. And one of my signed books will be worth 25 cents more in 20 years. So don't lose it, whatever you do. And then as a final little thing today, I'm going to give away a Gardening with Cisco t-shirt, and I'll explain that when I give it away. But it's quite the collector's item. I never sell any of these t-shirts. I give one away at every talk. This is the 4th series, all designed by my wife, Mary. So pretty fun. But I think what I'm going to start with is a few samples, because they may not last too long, and I want to try to pass them around. You might try to be gentle with these, because I'm not sure how far they're going to go. But so I brought 2 really cool iris here, and I love iris, but I got a problem with them. A lot of iris, if you don't divide them every other year, they stop blooming, and so it's kind of frustrating at times. These iris are native to Washington State along the Pacific Ocean, and so they're called Pacific Coast iris. Now, they probably each have a name, but, I bought about 1 million of them. I have no idea what names their actual names are, but they bloom without fail every year. They don't spread around and take over your garden. They bloom in sun or shade, and I think they're just absolutely lovely. And the rabbits don't eat them. Oops. Well, I guess I was the guy that wasn't gentle. But I'll hand around the flower anyways. You'll get to see it. So here I could just, thanks. Thank you. So here's the other one. Thanks. Oh la la. So if you go into the nursery, so one day I walked into Malbec's, and every nursery I walk into, they run up to me the minute I come in, because I'm a human cash register. They know I'm gonna buy the best stuff they got. And they ran up to me and said, "You got to see the Pacific Coast iris we have." And they had a lot of selections, so I bought a lot of them. And Swanson's had them the other day. They don't have any right now, but they had them the other day. And so there's a good chance you walk into a good nursery, you may find some, and I guarantee you'll be happy if you plant them. And it's funny, this morning I was out getting some samples, and a neighbor walked by and said, "I've got something I want to give to you." And I went, "Oh boy, what's that?" She goes, "A Pacific Coast iris." I have about 12,000. I said, "I'll take it." So, okay. All right, I wanted to show something else here. So I just don't know if you're familiar with this incredibly cool plant. Now, you probably know, if you've heard me speak before, you know that I'm married to a great gardener. So my wife, Mary, is a really skilled gardener. Even though she worked on heart studies for most of her career, she'd get bored with that and quit and be a gardener for a while. And she was a gardener at Children's Hospital working with this famous woman named Sue Buckles, who was a terrific gardener. So she learned a ton, more than she learned from me, that's for sure. And so the problem is, if you're married to a great gardener, we walk out the door, and I say, "Wow, I'm going to put a lavender here." And she goes, "No, we're going to put a hardy fuchsia." "No, we're not." "Yes, we are." If the neighbors see both our hands and feet in the air at the same time, they go, "Oh, no, garden wars again." It got so bad, we had to cut the garden right down the middle. She got this side, I got this side, and whenever someone would come over, we'd stand shoulder to shoulder and go, "Which side do you like the best?" And I know she's bribing all those people that keep voting for her side. So So this plant, when she wasn't looking out the window to make sure I wasn't cutting anything from her side of the garden, came from her side of the garden this morning. So this is the botanical name of this is laurel petalum, and but what it is, this is called razzleberry. You might have heard of that, but there's a whole bunch of these new laurel petalums coming out. And if you look at the flower, I think you'll see that it's just like a witch hazel flower. Witch hazel flowers come out on bare branches in the middle of winter on the branches of witch hazels, and they're often very fragrant. So, and hummingbirds are nuts for them. So if you want to keep those Anna hummingbirds happy in the winter, I travel all the time. So I don't like hanging up hummingbird feeders, because if the house sitter that comes to take care of my dogs when Mary and I are gone doesn't take good care of the hummingbird feeder, a hummingbird can starve to death in 1/2 hour in freezing weather if it's dependent on your feeder, and all of a sudden the feeder is frozen or not there. So I feed all my hummingbirds with plants that bloom in the wintertime. And my hummingbirds made it through. I don't know how they did. This was the worst winter I have seen for so long. Now, this is in the witch hazel family, but they're all done blooming. They bloom in the winter. But the hummingbirds are all over this thing, too. So it's evergreen, and it stays bright red. So this is really a cool plant. I have a new one in my side of the garden, but it got hammered by the cold, probably because it was the first year. A lot of times plants have to develop a strong root system, build little strength before they can get through a winter like this one, and I planted it late in the season. Mine made it, and it's coming back, but mine is called Jazz Hand, and it has bigger flowers, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, so this is laurel petalum. This one is razzleberry, but the one I have now is Jazz Hand. And I think there's even a variegated with red and variegation Jazz Hand now, I think. So I've read about it, but I haven't seen it in a nursery yet. So, so nice hummingbird plant, really attractive. And Mary's is really old, and I'd say that it's probably about 6 feet tall and 6 feet wide. Big red explosion full of these great flowers out there. And that's almost done. It's been blooming for quite a while. When it first came out, I mean, everybody walking by the houses, what is that plant? Okay, so I just wanted to tell you that, you know, a lot of times people ask me, what are some great combinations? So I thought I'd show you one that I love that's in one of my planters. This is a geum. So some people call them geum, but they're really geums. And I put this with this magenta pelargonium or Martha Washington geranium, whatever kind of geranium it is. And this combination, I have to actually put a little box of tissues out there because grown men burst into tears when they walk by. So one other thing I was going to mention, anytime you've got like black colored foliage, makes all the hot colors just jump out like mad. And you might be surprised to know that geraniums have a special quality. So I don't know, here, I'll pass this down for just, and I wanted to bring, before, I hope I remember and find my way back to the first story, but I wanted to bring peony Buckeye Betty this morning, but because of this darn cold weather, it still hasn't opened up the flowers yet. And those are the old wedding flowers of back before we had refrigeration. They would cut a peony a couple days before the wedding when it was like a rock. Then they'd bring it into a really warm room, and it would usually get it to open just in time for the wedding, so they could make bouquets out of them. Buckeye Betty is this dark red. spectacular herbaceous peony, by far my favorite herbaceous peony, and I have that GM by it. Oh, la, 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 la. It is just so magnificent. It's unbelievable. But couldn't bring it today. Darn no luck. One other combo I wanted to show you, which I just love, and that is, I'm going to forget the name of this euphorbia. By the way, euphorbias have caustic sap, so I'm still going to pass this around. Just don't let any sap get in your eye, that's all, you know. There's a little story of me with euphorbia. So I always warn all euphorbias. There's a whole bunch: wolf and eye, Portuguese velvet, there's Merlot something or other. There's all these kinds, and I love them. But I know their sap is very caustic. And I know 4 people have burned the skin off their eyeball. So I was out working in the garden, and I cut one. I can't think which one it was, but it was bent on an angle, and it was going over to walk. I cut it, and it shot sap right into my eyes. I was really surprised. I went in the house, washed my eyes out really well, because I knew how caustic it is, felt fine, went back out and did more gardening. That night, I did what all men do. So if any of you women are thinking about marrying a man and you haven't done it yet, you need to know about this before you decide to do it. In the middle of the night, I wake up, my eyes burning like crazy. So I wake up Mary and I go, my eye, it's burning. She goes, come on, we're going to the emergency ward. No, I'm all right. I dumped it on her. I fell right back to sleep. She couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. I'm sorry, but that's the way it's just supposed to be. So the next day, I did end up in the emergency ward. I had blisters around my eyes for 3 days, but no effect on my eyes. But I do know 4 people, one that I worked with, that burned the skin off their eyeball. It didn't blind them or anything, but it was very painful, and they had a bright red eyeball for a couple of weeks. So you don't want to go through that. So be careful. So, and it's so funny because sometimes I give these away in my talks, and nobody wants it. I wonder why. So this is Flaming Embers, this orange one right here. So this is Flaming Embers. So it's really a cool euphorbia, but it spreads kind of fast. So watch out for that. Then the plant with the beautiful blue flowers, does it remind you of forget-me-not? Yeah, well, this is a real close relative to forget-me-not. It's called Brunera. The leaves folding up a little. They don't make good cut flowers. But so this Brunner has these sky blue flowers. This combination together in the garden is just so beautiful. You can't believe it. So here we go. I think by now this euphorbia has lost almost all its sap that would come out. I hope. Okay. So, all right, enough of those. Okay. I'm going to just talk about tomatoes before I give away a plant, okay? So, I don't know about you, but I love growing tomatoes. And it's probably the vegetable more Americans grow than anything else. You know what vegetable we eat more than any other vegetable on earth? Potatoes. French fries. And tomatoes second, pizza. So, all right. So, because it's so cold, if you put a tomato into your garden, you plant it, and the temperatures go below 45, what happens, it kills all the chlorophyll in the leaves in the tomato. The tomato turns purple. I'll bet some of you probably have seen this happen over the years. And the tomato doesn't produce hardly at all for the whole rest of summer. So I've been hefting my tomatoes into the garage at night, back out. Now I'm ready to plant, and I just haven't had time to do it, but I'm going to plant them because I've been looking at the King 5 weather, and it's not going to hardly go below 50 now, maybe 48. I think they can handle it. One thing you should do if you're going to grow tomatoes and this is a really cool one I'm going to tell you about. But if you're going to grow tomatoes, what you want to do is leave them out a little longer every night before you plant them. And if you could do that, at least maybe get out of bed at midnight and put it back in the garage. What it'll do is that'll harden it off and get it ready, toughen the little guy up for the cold. And it'll be able to handle the cold a lot better, because that's terrible when you wreck your tomato. Now, I grew a tomato for the last 2 years that I've never been able to find. Even from seed, I had trouble finding it. And it's called Glacier. And you may have heard, or you may have seen me do it on Evening Magazine on King 5. So it's an intermediate growing tomato. There's two kinds of tomato, determinate and indeterminate. An indeterminate tomato, Patio is one, Legends another. They grow to about 3 feet tall, 3 foot wide. Then they produce all their tomatoes all at once over about a period of a month, and that's it. It's done for the year. But people like them because you could plant them in a container. You don't even have to stake them up or anything, and they'll just stand there and produce some pretty good tomatoes. Then determinate tomatoes are the kind like Early Girl and so many others that they just keep growing and growing and growing and growing all season long, and they keep producing until finally the cold gets them or the rain makes all the tomatoes crack or whatever happens. So, but Glacier is a semi-determinate tomato. So it grows up, it won't get much more over 3 feet tall, comes from Sweden, then it gets gazillions of cherry tomatoes, about 1.5 inches in diameter, and just delicious as could be, and then it just intermittently produces tomatoes for the rest of summer. Not like Sun Gold. Do you all know that tomato? Is that good or what? That wins every blind taste test I do, and it's an indeterminate tomato. It just keeps growing and pumping out the tomatoes. So this thing gets about 3.5 feet tall, produces a ton, then intermittently produces. But I planted my Glacier, I think, almost a month ago. And it's still hanging in there. It's not looking the happiest I've ever seen in my life, but it's got flowers all over it. It's getting ready to produce. Last year, with Glacier tomato, I was eating tomatoes before mid-June. Homegrown tomatoes. That is a total rarity. But this year has been a little tough on the little guy. I hope it made it, So if you see a Glacier, I found one at Sky Nursery this year. But I showed it on TV, and I called the people at Sky because people were asking me, where did you get that? And I think I said Sky Nursery on TV. It sold out that morning after the show showed. So, oh la la. So this is a new one I've got. And so I have a friend named Marcia Dillon, and she grows all the tomatoes for the Master Gardener program in King County. She's amazing. At her house, she grows over 100 different varieties of tomatoes. It's like a jungle in her backyard of tomatoes, And the interesting thing is that she's going to move, and then I don't know what the Master Gardener's going to do, because she grows them for their sales and everything. She always saves me about 4 of the best ones. So she gave me Copper Beauty, which looks like it's going to be a really good one. Some of these aren't going to be available for a while, but this one I know is now and then in nurseries. This is called Bloody Butcher. And I've had it once before, and it's really good. Kind of little bigger than cherry tomatoes. So flavorful, you can't believe it. So look for that. By the way, I just remembered to tell you about the geranium. Geraniums have a special quality you might not know about. So, I passed around that magenta one. And that is, I had a TV show on Northwest Cable News. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was very popular, but it showed in 6 states. And one day, a woman called in. It was a call-in show live on TV. And a woman called in from Idaho, and she said, how do you keep, she goes, is there something that'll repel flies? She said, I live on a farm. We've got cattle and other animals. She goes, we open the door, flies just shoot in. You can't, if the screen comes off the window, they're in the house. She goes, it's driving us crazy. Is there a plant that repels flies? I said, not that I know of, She hung up. Next caller from Austria. She goes, I want to tell you something that you don't know. And I go, what's that? She goes, you think we put those pelargoniums or Martha Washington geraniums in our window boxes just because they're pretty in Austria? I went, no. She goes, no, they repel flies like crazy. Well, when Mary and I moved into our house, we have a wonderful house near Sandpoint Golf Course. And when we bought it, it was winter, and so it's got a detached garage. So to get to the backyard, you walk between the garage and the house. Well, when summer came, for some reason, 60 flies lived between the house and the garage. We couldn't figure out what it was. There wasn't anything to attract the flies. They never seemed to do anything but fly in circles. But it was embarrassing beyond Tweedle when I'd be given a tour of the garden, bringing people back to see the back garden, and they had to walk through this thing of flies whipping around. So I told Mary, I say, this Austrian woman said, if we plant geraniums in our planters, we won't have flies, it'll repel the flies. So we tried it. We always put planters between our house and the garage. We planted pelargoniums with other things in there. The flies disappeared. I couldn't believe it. For 6 years, we planted pelargoniums in any container we did. After 6 years, I said, let's try not planting any pelargoniums, see if the flies came back. They came back. We always plant pelargoniums now. So if you've got flies, this might be a good tip. Okay, I'm going to give away my, I haven't finished about this. Okay, one last thing. When you buy your tomato, buy the sturdiest little guy you can get. You don't want the big tall guy that's flopping over. If you do, then what you might have to do is dig a trench that's as deep as the root ball if you put it on its side. A big long trench. Lay the tomato in there, take off all the leaves that'll be in the trench, and just take the top 6 or 4 inches and stick them out of the ground, cover all the rest. The whole tomato will root like crazy, and you'll end up with a great tomato. But if you try and keep that staked and everything, it probably won't work. So I look for the little sturdy guy whenever you can. When I plant this, I'm going to pull this bottom leaf off, and I'm going to plant it up to the first leaf you see on there. So, because tomatoes root like crazy on their stem, it'll grow twice as fast. This is an odd tomato in that it's a potato leaf tomato. Most tomatoes have cut leaves that are real serrated, but this is a potato leaf tomato. I don't really understand why some are this way and some are the other way, but so if you can find Bloody Butcher, grab it. You know who's doing a lot? Well, I was really impressed with Sky Nursery's selection of tomatoes, and Swanson's has great selection too. I don't know about other nurseries right now, but they're really top of the line. Okay, by the way, somebody the other day asked me if I see 2 tomatoes and one has a flower on it and one doesn't, which should I buy? Buy the one with a flower. You're going to get tomatoes twice as soon. Okay. All right, get this guy out of the way. That's the one plant. Mary told me if I give away that tomato, she's going to cut my nose off. So I'm not going to give that away. Okay, now somebody's going to get a chance. to win a great plant, and then I'm going to rotate and take questions from the audience too. So I think the first plant I'll give away today is a heuchera. So these are called coral bells. And, when I grew up in Wisconsin, I'm a cheesehead, a Packer fan. And when I grew up in Wisconsin, heucheras were wildflowers out in the prairies. And they had green leaves, not like this, but green leaves. And then they had dark red flowers, and they were called Heuchera sanguineum. Sanguineum means blood red flower. And hummingbirds went to the flowers all the time. So I came out here in 1971, and I was gardening and things. And I'm not sure what year it was, but one day I went to the nursery, and they had heucheras with colored leaves. I love plants with colored leaves because I'm a perennial gardener, and perennials, and I'm a mixed border gardener really, so I have a lot of shrubs and perennials and even some annuals all mixed together out there. And the thing is, especially perennials and shrubs, the flowers are here today, gone tomorrow most of the time. Very ephemeral. So I like to have plants with colored foliage because you can make all kinds of combinations all summer long. This is a tricky color. This is, I think, Fire Chief. Yeah. And but I've noticed it goes really good with light blue. So if you got something with light blue flowers, it looks pretty cool together. So all of a sudden in the nursery, there were all these heucheras with colored leaves. Now there's a new color every time I go to the nursery. I can't believe it. And so I absolutely love these. Now, one of the questions I get, people go, well, okay, so the wildflower one that you grew up with in Wisconsin, which you can buy at nurseries, by the way, and it's very attractive to hummingbirds. They go, well, is something like Fire Chief, is that going to be attractive to hummingbirds? And I had to admit, I didn't know. I didn't know until one time we had two couples coming to enjoy dinner with us on our patio. And we eat always out on our patio. And I have 3 fountains out there, all kinds of plants to attract hummingbirds. So they're always flitting around. So I made a bouquet to put out in the middle of the table when we had dinner. So I used a lot of plants with coarse flowers and coarse foliage, and I needed something to contrast with that, because contrast is the name of the game in gardening. If you got coarse things, you want fine things. If you got spiky things, you want round things, So I had so much coarse stuff, I thought, I'll go out and cut off the sprays of flowers off a lot of the heucheras and put them in my bouquet. I couldn't believe it. In the middle of our dinner, 6 of us on a 44-inch table sitting around that bouquet, the hummingbirds started coming to the heuchera flowers in the bouquet between us. The only problem was I love wearing red. I had a red sweatshirt on, and one of those hummingbirds kept trying to stick its beak in my ear, which is very frustrating when you're trying to enjoy a Brussels sprout casserole. So, all right, so one of you lucky people is going to win this. Now, one thing I want to tell you about heucheras is that, and this is true with almost all plants you plant, you always want to follow the directions on the tag. But a lot of the tags are written for the whole nation, not the Pacific Northwest. And I find sometimes heucheras, if it says put it in full sun, it starts to burn up. Put it in more shade. If you put it in shade because it says shade and it doesn't do well, dig it up and put it in more sun and it'll probably come right out of it. So you got to experiment a little with these guys. It seems more with heucheras than any other kind of plant I do. So one of you lucky, and by the way, in container gardens designs, these things stay colorful all winter long. So they really add a nice burst of color in summer or winter in your container garden. And I do a lot of container gardening because I only get half the garden. So I decided maybe I should garden the driveway too. This winter, there were 70 plants in my garage. I took the side of the garage, turned it into all windows, put in skylights, and I only parked in my garage for 1 week in 1986. What a waste of great gardening space if you put a car in there. So, all right, so one of you lucky people is going to win this plant. Okay, so who has ever had a chihuahua? Who ever wished they had a chihuahua? Okay, right back there, you're going to get your chance to win this plant. Now, this could be hard because I got a tough stumper question for you. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever been to Japan. I love Japan, and I led a garden tour. I lucked out right before the pandemic started. I led a garden tour to Japan. I got back and realized that's the end of garden tours for a while. I've led 20 international garden tours now, and I'm leading 4 this year, so because of the pandemic. But so, if you go to Japan, which is beautiful and so many great gardens and nice people, so this plant is super popular in Japan. It's called Nandina, and people call it heavenly bamboo. This is not a bamboo. This is in the barberry family, and it's a tough plant, but it's a real lovely plant. And the one that I cut this off is about this tall with nice new red growth. In the winter, they turn really red. They get berries on them. Now, in Japan, almost every house has one of these heavenly bamboos planted right by the front door. So you get 3 choices of why they plant these heavenly bamboos by the front door. Are you ready? Okay. Is it because they're just so beautiful they can't be without them? Is it because they have really fragrant flowers? Or is it because they believe this plant has a magic quality that you can tell your troubles to, and it takes your troubles and worries away, doesn't kill the plant, and you feel way better? Which is it?
I think number 3.
You got it. It's number 3. But I have to tell you that when I put a 2-ton rock through to the side of the house and followed it with a bulldozer, it did no good at all. None. So, okay, you just won this wonderful heuchera. Thank you.
Is that right?
Cool.
That's good to know.
All right. So I want to see if anybody has a garden question they want to ask at this stage of the game. Usually I go back and forth between garden questions and other things, but otherwise I'll just keep cruising along here. Okay, so I think I'll give away a tool next. So this tool right here is called a Dig-It, and it's one of my favorite weeding tools I have. You can go deep to get the dandelions out. It's great for in between sidewalks. I use it for all kinds of weeding. So it's got a really cool story behind it that I like to tell. So there's a woman who lives in Bothell, and she's a widower. She lives in a really small house, but has a nice sized property, and her love in life, she doesn't care about money. She's got enough just to get by, but her love in life has always been gardening. And she was the president of the Bothell Garden Club, and, just really loved gardening. Well, she had one son. That son was born an entrepreneur. They say that 2 days after he was born, he set up a lemonade stand in the nursery at the hospital. But this kid, when he was like 12 years old, he had 8 kids working with him with paper routes. He just always knew how to make money. And now he owns, I think he still owns, a huge exercise equipment company somewhere out in Bothell. He has a factory. So one day his mom had to go see him about something. And while she was sitting there, she saw these metal parts sitting in a bin. She said, "What do you do with those metal parts?" And he goes, "I got to get rid of them. We scrap them, they're just leftover." She said, "Could I have one of those?" I think he sold it to her. So she took one, put a wooden handle on it, started weeding with it, really liked it, showed it to the garden club. Pretty soon, people were knocking on the door of her house saying, "Will you sell me one of those or give me one of those?" So she started making them for everybody in the garden club. Pretty soon, people she never even saw before are knocking on the door saying, "Could you make me one of those things?" She was going broke making them for free. She decided, well, maybe I'll sell them. So she decided to put a comfortable, really bright handle so you don't lose them, because I don't know how many of you, I think there must be 12 hoary knives out in my backyard with those wooden handles. And so she put these handles on, and now you can get these, you can find these in quite a number of nurseries. It's called a Digit, and her company is the Digit Company. And as I understand it, she is now 3 times richer than her son. So, all right, so one of you lucky people is going to win this. Who has ever had a rabbit, a pet rabbit? Okay, right there. So when I was a kid, I had a pet bunny. It was a little white bunny, and I named him Snowball. I loved that bunny so much. I hate those rabbits now. They ate my vegetable garden last year. They eat a lot of my ornamental grasses, and they love hosta. They just devour hosta. And from what I understand, and Mary hasn't gone along with letting me use it yet, but something called plant skid is supposed to be the best repellent. I can't put a garden around my veggie garden because of the way it's built with these walls and everything. So plant skid, the problem is plant skid is dried pig blood and hot peppers. And when Mary found out what was in that stuff, and we have 2 dogs, she said, "You're not putting that out there." So I'm still trying to talk her into that. But a lot of people who've called my radio shows and other things, and in my talks, tell me that it works pretty good. So you could try that. But and I'll tell you how I got that bunny, because it's really a fun story. So when I was a little kid, I was a Cub Scout. Every year they had a Cub Scout jamboree. 500 kids came to this huge Cub Scout jamboree thing every year. And the MC would pick one kid out of 500 kids. He got to come up and sing Jingle Bells and win the bunny. Every year I tried so hard, and I was always like one of the 2 littlest kids in my class. I was a really little kid. And so they never saw me standing up, jumping, anything. And I wanted that bunny so bad. When I was 10 years old, the MC, I was way in the back of the hall, points at me and picks me to win the bunny. I forgot the words to Jingle Bell. I was so excited, but I got the bunny. Wasn't until years later I found out that was one of my dad's best friends, and he knew my dad did not want that bunny. Oh, la, la. Okay, so you're going to get your chance to win this cool plant. All right. What is the smartest bird on earth? What kind of bird? Do you want choices, or do you want to go for it? Crow, you nailed it so well. Okay, you won this. And I think you're going to enjoy this tool, and you won't lose it. So, crows. I watch the crows at my house, and they find nuts. They drop them in the road, not to break them, so that the cars run them over and break them. They're that doggone smart. So if the car misses it, they go grab it and move it to a new spot. And you may know about those experiments they did at UW. So they wore masks. And they did it right in my neighborhood. All my neighbors were terrified of these guys with a mask. I was saying, these guys are not going to rob our houses. You wouldn't walk around with a mask in bright daylight if you're going to do that. But that was something like 12 years ago. And what they did, they captured crows and they tagged them and then let them go. And anytime they put the mask on, because they wore the mask when they did it, crows attacked them, just attacked them. And interestingly now, I know the professor that did the studies, he said if they go out and put the mask on, they get attacked. 12 years later, crows have not forgotten. They are brilliant birds, to say the least. And interestingly, I've had people ask, well, I have nothing against any kind of animal on earth, but crows, I don't really like when they come in my garden because they eat a lot of little songbirds. And I don't like that. They grab them right out of the nest. I've seen it happen a few times. And they also throw big pieces of bread in my fountains, which drive me nuts. So, but I never, I'm not going to bother with them. But I was giving a talk on Vashon Island, and a woman asked, how do you get crows to leave your garden? They're really making a mess and blah, 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 blah. And I said, boy, I ran the Seattle U grounds for 24 years, and they would come in by just so many, about 5 in the afternoon, and they'd go along the edge of our beds and look for worms and stuff, make the mess like you never saw. And I said, I could never get them to go away. A 93-year-old woman raises her hand. And I go, yeah. And she goes, I know how to get rid of crows. So I go, okay, how do you do it? She goes, well, you got to shoot one. I said, isn't it illegal to shoot crows? She goes, I just shoot one. No one tells. I said, well, who shoots it? She goes, don't give me any lips, honey. I'm a crack shot. So I said, well, okay, you shoot a crow, then what do you do? She goes, you take the crow and you throw it out in the middle of your garden. She goes, all the other crows for miles around come and have a giant funeral for the crow out in your garden, and then they fly away and they don't come back for a couple of months. And I'm like, well, then what do? You go out and shoot another crow? She goes, no, you dummy, you throw the crow in the freezers. Oh, la, la. And interestingly, we had a crow get electrocuted at SU. It landed on a high-tension wire that didn't have good coating on it. One of the gardeners came in and said, wow, I just saw a crow get electrocuted out there. I said, what are you going to do? He said, I was going to bury it. And I said, well, give it to me. I want to do an experiment with this thing. So I went out and found the crow. It had a very surprised look on its face. And I stuck that out in the spot where they were making a big mess. They all came. They went away for a couple of months. I didn't throw the crow in the freezer, though. So, oh, la, la. Okay, any questions at this point? Right here. What kind of plant is that? Do you know? Maybe, could you bring that for me? Thank you so much. It's just so I can get a look, and I might know what that is. It can be a little tricky sometimes guessing what these things are, but thank you. Oh, I know this plant. This is plant mysterioso. I'm not sure what this is. But so is this on just the lower leaves or all the way up the tree? All the way up. Okay. All right. The first thing I can tell you is I see no signs of bugs on this. So I don't think this is an insect problem. I don't even see signs of fungus or anything. So I don't believe this is a disease. It's possible it could be a virus, but I don't think so. So my guess is that it's a nutrient deficiency. So what I would do, I would go out and get some organic lawn food. Or if you've got a friend that's got some or anything, because you don't want a big bag of fertilizer you may only use once or something. But if you can get something, you want something high in nitrogen. And then put that down. And I like organic fertilizer better than synthetic, because synthetic fertilizer is made out of petroleum, and they put other things in with it, and it's very salty. And so if you accidentally put too much around your plant, it can actually suck the moisture right out of the roots and burn your plant. That's, if you've ever over-fertilized with a fall and winter lawn fertilizer, and the whole lawn turns pitch black, that's you just burn the tweedle out of the plant by putting too much. So, and it'll take a little while, but I suspect you'll see it green up like crazy. Now, I may be wrong on this because it's hard to tell from this. That's my first guess. Now, the only other thing I can think of is if this was a tree growing on clay soil that didn't like clay soil, then it could be that roots are starting to have problems, starting to rot. But I'd try the nitrogen first, see if it helps. Great. Okay. So, all right, I think I'll give away another plant here. All right. Okay, I'm going to give this one away next. So, I'll bet most of you know hen and chicks. So, hen and chicks are succulents that are hardy in the Pacific Northwest. In my driveway, I have about 70 succulents that aren't hardy, and that's why they all go in the garage. And but I love them. But I love hen and chicks. So the name is Semperviven. Semperviven means lives forever. But they don't live forever because the mama plant puts out a flower and she dies. But when she dies, before she dies, she has a whole bunch of babies that come up around her, and that's why we call them hen and chicks. So, and then the middle just kind of fades away. You could pull it out, because sometimes they don't look that good, but a lot of times they just fade away and you don't even notice it. So there are new ones coming out that are really cool. So this is the Chick Charms series of these, and look at the color in there. So they have some that are yellow in the middle, and now they've got these ones that are really dark colored, and they get way darker in the winter time. So they're pretty darn cool. Now, where do I put these? Well, there's a couple of things I do with them. You could put them in that corner where you can't grow anything because it's so hot and dry, you know, and hard to water. And so maybe I have like I'll usually put a cool looking rock there and then stick these in, and they get so thick they just pile up on each other, but they survive anyway. And you hardly ever have to water them or anything, and it looks so cool. The other thing you could do with these, if you have a really neat-looking pot, just plant this in the pot. They'll overload. They'll just get so crowded in the pot, they'll go over the side, and they'll go all the way down to the ground, and it'll look like a waterfall of hen and chicks. That is so cool, you know. So these are pretty cool. I think they're really neat plants. And you can put them just about anywhere, but they got to have full sun and well-drained soil. That's the one thing that they do require. So, okay, one of you lucky people is going to win this. Who's ever had a guinea pig? Okay, right there, you're going to get your chance to win this. I had the cutest guinea pig anybody's ever had when I was a kid, you know. He escaped one day and I never saw him again. I'm still mourning over him. Okay, all right, here's your question. So, people are often surprised to find out what the fastest insect on Earth is. Most people say dragonfly. There's one insect that can fly faster than 75 miles an hour, which is what a dragonfly can fly. So the insect that can grow faster, that can fly faster, is a horsefly. Here's your question. What is the horsefly chasing when it goes 90 miles per hour? Do you want three choices? Is it chasing a juicy person that wants a nice bite of? Is it chasing Is it trying to get away from a dragonfly, or is it chasing a girl? A girl fly. Girl, you got it. Yep, they go 90 miles an hour when they're after a female horsefly. And interestingly, they must get disoriented now and then because dragonflies eat a ton of them. Yeah, there we go. Enjoy that. You're going to like that. You could even grow that as a house plant if you wanted to. So, yeah, give it as bright light as you can, though. Okay, any questions right here do you want to ask? Okay, how about right back there, and I'll get you in a minute. Oh, sorry, let me run up a little closer. I can't quite hear. Oh, good. We'll have to, that'll help me a lot.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much
Okay.
better.
I have a mountain laurel that I planted at the top of a rain garden last fall, and some of it is brown. I was told it was a real showstopper, and at this point there's just one little section where it looks like it might flower, and some of it is brown, and some of it looks like it has new growth, but it's just green, and nothing else is happening.
So I'm trying to think of the botanical name of mountain laurel. I know the plant, you get those button-like flowers. It's in the rhododendron family.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it's very close relative, and maybe that name will pop back into my head here. Mountain laurels are tricky. They're native to the East Coast, and they have the coolest flowers of any plant you ever saw. The problem is they're picky about how much sun they get. So they need the same soil rhododendron has, which is high in a lot of organic, compost in there in the soil. And if they're in too much sun, they burn up. If they're in too little sun, they don't flower. So it may be, you may be forced to experiment a little. When did you plant that?
I planted it in the fall.
Oh, it got beat up by the winter.
Really?
Oh yeah, the winter took a toll on so many plants. So I think some of these brown leaves you'll have to pull off, and I think it'll recover, but it may not bloom well this year because of just getting a living Tweedle pounded out of it by Mama Nature.
What
So,
can I do between now and next year to
I
protect
think
it?
give it some rhododendron fertilizer. It'll love that. And organic rhododendron fertilizer. I should explain, whenever I say organic, it's totally different than synthetic. You can't burn your plant because when you put it in the ground, it's all things that were living. And when you put that in the ground, the plant doesn't even know it's there until the millions of microorganisms that live in the soil eat it up. It has to go through them, and then it slowly becomes available to the plant. And so organic rhododendron food is good for acid-loving plants. And I think now, I don't think it's too late to even fertilize it now. Usually I do it first week of April of all my rhodies and mountain laurels and all of those. So I'd go ahead and get some of that because you'll be using it over the years and work it around the drip line. That'll help. And don't let it dry out, whatever you do. And I think that plant will come back.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. And do you have a question? Okay. All right. So they've had rosemary for 20 years. By the way, I should tell you that according to English folklore, if you have a beautiful rosemary in your garden, it means a woman is the head of the household. She was shaking her head, yep. So their rosemary has got dieback now on some of the branches. A 10-year-old rosemary is kind of an old plant. They don't live forever. This is true of lavender as well. They have to have really well-drained soil. And so if the soil isn't really almost perfectly drained, we get a really wet, cold winter like this with all that snow piling up and everything else, it starts rotting the roots. So I have a feeling you'll probably be replacing those rosemary in the next couple of years. By the way, my wife Mary heard me say that about rosemary. I came home from giving a talk. There was one this big right by the front door. So yeah, you could try pruning it down, but I don't think you're going to be able to save those. It might be worth trying. Cut all the dead stuff off. It can't hurt. But if it's the base, those aren't going to grow back. So, darn. Okay, I better give away something here. Okay, I got one more. I wanted to show you this. So, I can't give this away. I only have one. But this is the coolest tool on earth. And so I was giving talks years ago at the San Francisco Flower and Garden Show. And this guy that had a booth there came up to me and he knew who I was. And anyway, he goes, I want to give you a tool. So he makes these, and he makes ones that you can extend, so you can cut way farther up. So this is called a cut and hold pruner. And one thing I like is I don't work for this guy. I'm not trying to give him a big ad, but I love the tool, so I don't mind telling you about it. And I'll tell you where to get it in a minute. So I can't talk while I do this, so I'm going to show you how it works, okay? So let's say you want to deadhead your rose, and you don't want to get all chopped up. And by the way, anytime you prune a rose, wear rose gloves. They come all the way up past your elbow with leather, because if you get pricked with a rose that has mildew on the pricker, you can get a blood disease. It happened to a friend of mine, 2 weeks in the hospital. Ended up okay, but boy, was he sick. So don't mess around with roses. Don't get pricked by roses. So I'm going to show you how to do it. So let's say this is a rose that I'm pruning. So this is called a cut and hold pruner. And so it's so nice because you cut off the rose, then you drop it in the bucket. And if you don't want to walk into your perennial garden because it's rainy or something, but you got plants, you got a deadhead, you just reach in, stick them in the bucket. I love this thing. I use it all the time. So, and I have the extension one, and I use that on my wisteria all the time because I don't really like going up the ladders. I was a certified arborist for years, but I'm 73 now, and I just don't feel the same on a ladder as I used to. So, and I know so many people have fallen off them, so be careful on ladders. So I use this all the time. Now, if you turn it the other way, if you cut, it just cuts. It won't hold it. So, if you turn it the wrong way, it drives you nuts. But it works great, and you get used to which way to turn it. So it's the place that sells these is you can go on the computer. The easiest would just say cut and hold pruner, and a whole bunch will come up, but you want the one from the Wildflower Seed Company. So you can go to Wildflower, let's see, it's www.wildflower-seed.com. So just remember, Wildflower Seed Company. So I think it's top of the line, and I've had this for years. It's never broke, nothing. Try and cut, a major branch off, you might break it, but that's the only way. All right, any questions at this point? All right, I'm going to give away another gift here. So, I love the living Tweedle out of lavender. This one's a little beat up, but it'll pull right out of it, So, I didn't have a lot of choice at the nursery. I went on a Monday. That's the worst day to go to a nursery after the weekend, So, but I love this little guy. Now, I've never grown this one, but I've grown a lot of its relatives. This is English lavender. English lavender is the best for cooking you can get. Some lavenders are poison, so you want to make sure if you cook with lavender, and a lot of times I give talks up at the Lavender Festival, and I always stop and get a lavender mocha. Oh, la, la, that is so good. And it's always made out of angustifolia, which is English lavender. Now, how many of you have ever had a lavender with bare stems on the bottom? Yeah, it's so common, and it drives you nuts, They're so pretty when you plant them, and they smell so good and everything. And then as they grow, the bare stems get taller and taller, and pretty soon they look terrible. When they sell you a lavender, they expect you to keep it for 5 years. They figure you're going to replace it in 5 years because of the bare stems. And so there are tricks to keep your lavender going longer. So one of them is every spring so now this has already been shared, but every spring, early March, should go out and shear your lavender within a ½ inch of the top of the bare stems. So here's the bare stems, here's the green, all the way down to within a ½ inch above the bare stems. And if you do that every spring, you will greatly slow down the onset of those bare stems. The other thing is, the faster a lavender grows, the quicker they get bare stems. So if you go grosso that gets like this high, it's going to get bare stems fast. Even if you shear it, you're not going to be able to hold it off too long. But if you get a dwarf lavender, I've got some that are I've got one, Thumbelina Lie, is only 6 inches tall. And I don't have a bare stem on that, and I shear it every spring. And Hidcote is a really good one, very famous, so fragrant you can't believe it. And that only gets 2 feet tall, and I shear it every year, and it takes forever before they get bare stems. This is a new one that I've never grown before. It's called Blue Imp. Blue Imp. And so fragrant, you can't believe it. You know where I always plant these? Right by the front door, so that anybody that's coming in the door can't resist rubbing their hands through it. They smell so good when they come in the house, So this is Blue Imp. It's not supposed to get over 20 inches tall ever. And so if you shear this every spring, you're not going to get bare stems for quite a while. You got to put these in sun. If you've ever experienced it like I have, putting them in a little bit of shade, the flowers all go for the sun so much that it knocks the plant over, And if you put it by the sidewalk, then all the flowers are going right over the sidewalk, which isn't so good. So this Blue Imp, I think, is going to, stay really beautiful, and it is really a good fragrant one, and I think quite pretty too. So shear them every spring. All right, somebody's going to get a chance to win this plant. So who is a pretty avid vegetable gardener? Okay, right there, you're going to get your chance to win this. Okay, so what is one thing that's good about fleas? You want 3 choices? Okay. Okay. They get company to leave your house quicker. They jump beautifully in the air, or they're the only thing that gives my old dog any exercise. I think you won this. Great. Here, I think they get it too. Okay, thank you so much. All right, you're going to love that. That's a good one.
Okay, that'll be fun.
Okay, has anybody got a question they want to ask? Right back there.
Here.
I think I can hear you.
And what it's doing, it's not flowering. It's just getting taller and taller and taller. It's about 1.5 feet tall, but it won't flower.
I think I suspect this evening primrose she has, it's not flowering. She's wondering why. I think it's too early. I think it's going to flower when things warm up a little more. So many plants are delayed this year. It's just amazing. And so I'm sure evening primrose is just delayed, but they're really avid bloomers. So I think it'll start, but it might be a couple weeks yet even before it'll start blooming.
Should I cut it back?
I don't think I'd cut it back. If you do, that's just going to delay it a lot more. Years later, you may be able to get away with that because once it's really going and doing great, it'll be so apt to bloom. That's some of my plants like Monarda and asters and things. I cut them down in April so that they don't get so doggone tall and leggy, and then they come back and bloom. It delays them, but not very much.
Thanks.
So you're welcome. Okay, so I got one more incredible plant to give away, and then I still have a T-shirt and my book. Okay, so now this is one of my all-time favorite plants. You know, the very first TV show I was on was called Northwest Home and Garden TV Show. Do you know who the host of that show was? Jeff Probst from Survivor. If you've ever watched Survivor, really a cool guy. He was going to school. He makes $20 million every 5 years now doing Survivor. But he didn't quite make that on the gardening show. But he worked at Boeing. And his dad, he was taking acting lessons at UW. And his dad told him, there's no way you're quitting this great job at Boeing to do this hokey gardening show. Look what I did for his career. So the very first show that we did was at my house. So the producer was there and everything. And I go, what do you want me to do? I'd never been on TV. She said, just start describing the plants in your garden right here. So I went to the first plant, and I talked about it, waxed poetic. Got to the second one, talked about that. Got to the fifth plant, started to describe it, and the producer went, stop! I go, what? She goes, you cannot say one more plant is your favorite. None. This is my favorite plant right here. So this is a hardy fuchsia. And I love hardy fuchsias. So the old fuchsias that we used to plant, I love them too. The hanging fuchsias, those are wonderful plants. They need shade. They come from high up in South American mountains and stuff. And some are hardier than we think they are, but no one knows that much. But these hardy fuchsias that they have experimented now and hybrided, they know they're hardy as a rock. Now, after this last winter, I've got some that are barely coming back, and I've got some I don't think are coming back, which breaks my heart. But most of them did come back. Some are doing pretty good. So they're quite hardy. And it's just if you get a winter like this, that's tough. But these are not like the other hardy fuchsia, the non-hardy fuchsias. They want sun. Not everyone. There's one called speciosum. There are a few that need shade, but almost all of them need sun. And so this, I like the ones with the bigger flowers. So this is going to have, flowers this big. And when you buy a fuchsia, try and buy one with single flowers. When they hybrid these plants to get double flowers, they hybrid out all the nectar. All the parts that make nectar, they take them out in order to get double flowers. Not always, but usually. So if you've got a hanging fuchsia with these spectacular double flowers, and the hummingbirds won't go to them, they'll go once. They go, there's no nectar in there, that's enough for me. These, the hummingbirds are on them all the time. So I have these in pots on my patio and just everywhere I want to be able to watch those hummingbirds having fun. It's really great. So this particular one, this one's called Beacon. And you probably can't see it, but it has these pink flowers that are really showy, and they're single, so you're going to get a lot of hummingbirds. And this is definitely a sun lover right here. And I wonder, not sure how tall this one gets. I've got so many that I'm losing track of which is which in my garden. This says part shade to shade, but I give it more sun or you're not going to get that many flowers on it. So try putting it in the sun. Not maybe where you get the reflected sunshine right off the driveway or something, but out in your perennial garden, it'll love it. So, and this gets 24 inches tall and 26 wide, and I always add a third to any tag. So this is going to be a good plant. In spring, what you do is what I generally do is wait for new ones to grow and see where the leaves are and decide where I want to cut it. So if I want it to get taller, if it doesn't die back in a gentle winter, you could cut it way up here. If it gets hammered in a cold winter or you just don't want it so tall, cut it down to the ground and new ones will come up. I usually plant these 2 inches deeper than they came out of the pot. Makes them hardier. So, okay, so some lucky person is going to win this. I think this is going to be a really great plant. Okay, who has slug problems in their garden? Nobody? Okay, well, you were first. Okay, so, all right, here's my question for you. Do ducks eat slugs? You only get 2 tries on this. Yes, you're right. Ducks do eat slugs. Now, I had read that before, but I had never, of course, seen it because, I don't raise ducks or anything. I was down in Corvallis, Oregon at a good friend's house, and she had ducks. So I asked her, do your ducks eat the slugs? She goes, oh, you won't find a slug in this garden. She goes, they gobble them up the minute they see them. Later that day, I went for a walk from her house. I find this slug about this long, big black thing, So it was horrible because I had to carry it home. I was a slimy mess. And I get back and I go, can I feed your duck this slug? She goes, well, I don't feed them slugs. They find them and eat them. And I said, well, would there be any harm? She goes, I guess not. So it rolled up into this solid ball. And I fed it to the slug, and the slug just went for it. The slug started choking the duck started choking to death on the slug. It was sitting there going, I almost had to give a duck a Heimlich maneuver. So yes, they eat slugs. Don't feed them one. All right, you won that. Enjoy that. Okay, all right. Does anybody have a question? Right here. Pardon me?
Is it true that dahlias don't like to grow in a pot?
What a great question. Is it true that dahlias don't like growing in pots? Hardly anybody knows that. It's true. They don't like growing in pots because dahlias get powdery mildew unless they get watered just right. So if they get stressed out by something, they get powdery mildew and it's horrible. And I've tried to grow them in pots. There are the dwarf ones, dwarf dahlias. I just planted one at my house called something Sunshine. And it's got black foliage and beautiful yellow flowers that turn red. That one I put in a combination in a pot. Because it's a dwarf, I think I'm going to get away with it. But a regular size or a big dahlia, don't even bother trying to grow them in a pot. Grow them in the best sunshine you got in well-drained soil with lots of organic in there. And give them alfalfa meal. Alfalfa meal, horse food. They sell it in the nurseries. Oh, good. I thought that was me. They gave a big thing at the flower garden show about turn your phones off. I'm up there giving the talk. My phone goes off in my pocket. I was like, oh, God. So anyway, Yeah, give dahlias alfalfa meals. You could buy it at the nursery and put it 2 cups around the average size dahlia, work it into the soil, make some bloom like crazy, then add some organic flower food with it, and it usually says how much to use. And oh my God, you won't believe how your dahlia will just pump out the blooms. I use alfalfa meal on roses all the time too. They love it. Every 6 weeks, I work it into the ground around my roses and dahlias. And man, they just adore the stuff. So it's great. Question there.
Put in the soil to keep it moist. What do you think of those granules?
Oh, okay. What do you call those things? Okay, you can buy these granulars, and there's a whole bunch of companies. I've never been crazy about them. I tried them. Megan and I showed them on TV a couple of times. Maybe if you're traveling all the time in the summer and you put them around the plant, maybe they're supposed to suck up the water and give it back to the roots when the plant needs it. I've never found them to work well for me. I don't know, but because I usually hire someone to water when I leave or something. And I have to tell you one quick story. So I travel a lot, and when I lead these garden tours around the world and stuff, or Mary and I just love to travel. And so we always have a house sitter come take care of our dogs. And and the only thing I ask them to do in the garden is to water, because nobody gets to weed my garden or do anything in it almost. But one year, I was leaving for Corsica in the spring, and the American Horticultural Society was coming to do a tour of my garden 3 days after I got back. And I'm going to be gone for 2.5 weeks in the middle of spring when the weeds are growing, and I knew this was going to be the embarrassment of my whole life. So I asked Mary, I said, how about if we pay our house sitter to weed? And she said, I'm not paying for someone to weed my garden, So I said, well, I'm going to pay her, and I'm going to show her how to do it and everything. So I go around, and I showed her how to water all our gardens, and she was a terrific person and everything. And then, and the dogs always come first, no matter what. But then I said, I'll pay you an extra $20 an hour anytime you weed my garden. I showed her which side was mine, everything, what's a weed, what isn't. I told her, if you don't know if it's a weed, don't pull it, okay? I'll pull it. Because I knew I wasn't going to have time to get the garden looking good, and I'd be embarrassed because Mary will be out there fixing hers up so quick. She did the best weeding job you've ever seen. There wasn't a weed in one garden she weeded. Unfortunately, she got mixed up and only weeded Mary's side of the garden. I'm still mad about that. My garden just was a mess. It still was a mess when the American Hort Society came. Hers was just spectacular. Okay. All right. I think right here.
But I have put coffee grounds in some of my plants. Which plants would accept it, and there are other plants that you don't do that?
Okay, so here's the thing about using coffee. She used coffee grounds in her plants, and she was wondering, are there some that like it, some that don't? Really, they all like it. I gotta take that back. There are some that don't. But as a general rule, if you're worried about using it on plants that don't like acid soil, when you cook your coffee, you take the acid right out of it. And also, there's an idea that coffee grounds repel slugs. They don't, unless you don't cook them. If you put straight coffee grounds out there, they kill slugs, kills worms, kills everything. I don't know why. But so nobody, and I don't think anybody do that, would be the most expensive slug bait you ever paid for in your life. And dogs would be poisoned if they licked any of it. So, but they aren't if they just lick a coffee ground that's been cooked, because you take the dangerous thing out of there. So as far as acid or neutral or sweet soil, you don't have to worry about that with coffee grounds. But for some reason that I don't think is well understood, coffee is not good for certain plants, and tomato is one. They know that you should never work coffee grounds where you grow tomatoes. So I would never use them in my vegetable garden. And then watch your plants. There may be others that have that effect. So if you use coffee grounds and a plant goes downhill, that's a definite warning that there's some kind of weird thing about coffee in that plant. Unfortunately, they don't know which ones it all is. So that's a really good question. Yes? I'm sorry, one more
To
time.
plant on the east side of a house.
Favorite, like, shrub?
Yes.
Okay, what would be my favorite shrub to put on the east side of the house? Well, you could, all right, let me think of a really good shrub to put on the east side. There's a lot of them that you could grow there. You could put a witch hazel there. There are witch hazels that are dwarfs, and you could espalier it so that it's up against the fence, and you'd attract hummingbirds, and they're fragrant, they're wonderful. And also camellia, any kind of rhododendron would love that situation right there. Anything that likes semi-sun, hydrangea would do spectacular. And boy, there's some nice hydrangeas out there, so that would be a great one. My current favorite hydrangea is Miss Sayori. It has red leaves for most of the summer, and then it has red flowers. It's quite cool. So, and it doesn't seem to turn toward blue like a lot of plants go to the blue. I should add something because I mentioned alfalfa meal. Don't fertilize your prize blue hydrangea with alfalfa meal, nor would you ever want to use it on rhododendron or azalea or camellia, anything that likes acid soil. It's very alkaline. I turned my beautiful blue wave hydrangea into mauve yuck. It was the ugliest flower I ever saw the color it turned. So, because whenever you have more alkaline soil, then hydrangeas turn toward red. So that's just the hydrangeas turn blue because they pick up aluminum out of the soil, and they can only pick it up in acid soil. So if you really want a blue hydrangea, get bluing agent. It's ammonium sulfate, I think. It's sulfur in there and aluminum sulfate, and it turns them way blue. So there's some plants I think will work really well for you. Okay, I am going to give away my book first here. So, of course, whoever wins this, I will sign this for you. Okay, so I've written 4 books. 2 I co-authored for Jackson and Perkin Roses with a friend of mine, but those are pretty old. They're still on Amazon, but they don't have like the newest roses that don't get disease. If you want a great book about the new roses that don't get disease, that are really good, it's called Growing Roses in the Pacific Northwest by my really close friend, Nita Jo Roundtree. But it's a really good book, and it tells about the new roses that are so good. So I put those 2 books are out there. But then my next book was Ask Cisco, a Q&A, and that did end up the #1 selling garden book in the United States. That was really exciting for me. And then, of course, they asked me to rewrite the same book. Because if you have a really successful book, They just want you to put it out again, and they'll put on lots of new questions on it or something. And I just went, no, I'm not writing the same book again. I can't do that. So we kept negotiating, and I talked them into letting me write this book. And it's short stories about gardening. So you learn about gardening, but you could tell from this talk that I'm a storyteller. So they're supposed to be really funny stories that teach you about gardening. I don't know if you'll laugh when you read them, but I laughed when I wrote them. So, and 10 minutes at bedtime cures all insomnia. So, all right. So some lucky person is going to win this book. So who is native to Seattle? Okay, right back there. You're getting your chance to win this book. All right. Okay. All right. Here is your question. So I grow a type of banana in my garden. It's called Musa Baju. It's a hardy banana. They get 25 feet tall, and they get bunches of bananas on them. And the bananas are small. They come from China and Japan up in really high elevations that makes them hardy. Here's your question. Can you eat the bananas that I get on my hardy bananas?
Yes.
Well, you're right. You can eat them. However, if you do, you'll never need to eat another prune for the rest of your life. They're like eating plastic. They use them to make a fabric, but you won. So I'll make sure to sign this before you go. All right. Okay, now I'm going to give away one of my T-shirts. So this is the 4th series of T-shirts designed by my wife, Mary. And it's kind of interesting because one woman won the very first T-shirt I gave away. I give one away to talk, never sell them. And she comes to so many talks I do, and I have to sign it with her wearing it. I'm running out of places I feel comfortable signing that. Okay. So, now I wrote a story in the book about when I was a hippie. So I think that's what inspired Mary to do this on this one. So around that peace sign, it says peace, love, and Brussels sprouts. And that's a Brussels sprout in the middle. And on the back, if you were a hippie, you might remember those flowers we put on our cars. I made one little mistake. I stuck them on my dad's car. That was not a smart maneuver. So I didn't get to drive that car for a long time. So one of you lucky people, now I have every size in this bag. So whoever wins this, you get to fish through and find your size. Okay, so who has a birthday today? Okay, I'm looking for the closest birthday. Who's got a birthday this week? Who's got a birthday this month? Who's got a birthday? Okay, she was first. You're going to get your chance to win it. All right, well, okay. So, I think I'll ask my favorite question when I end these talks. So this is going to be really hard. Are you ready for a tough question? This is going to be really hard. And by the way, if you win this, there's one condition. You have to wear it to Canlis Restaurant. They'll make you wear a tie, but other than that. Okay. So, who is by far the best looking, most intelligent, and buff TV and radio gardener except for Megan Black and Ed Hume?
You.
Oh, la, la! Hey, everyone, thank you so much. If you have a question I didn't answer, don't hesitate to come up and catch me.
Cisco, thank you so much on behalf of Elliot, my associate, the community relations associate, Deborah Montalero, our executive director, and everyone at University House, the staff and the residents for joining us today. And it was just a wonderful time we had, just like what we always have. So thank you so much. So can I please have everybody give a big ooh la la for this young ooh la la. Thank you, thank you. And those of you, our guests, that would like to have a little mini tour of University House Wallingford, in about 10 minutes or so, we'll be right in the lobby and be happy to take you around. And thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna keep a little.
Cool, yeah, see if you could find
How
that.
tall is it? Yeah. How tall does it get?
Well, I've seen them get 12 feet tall, but some of the others, like Jazz Hand, isn't supposed to get as tall.
Okay.
So Mary's is really old, about 6 feet.
6 feet. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, see ya. Hi.
What is about Lancia?
Manzia, yeah.
I had one a couple of years ago. It was beautiful, but the bug was crazy. But now I got another one this year. If I'm thinking to it.
Are you going to the pond or the ground? Yeah, so the trip goats gotta keep them really well watered and fertilize the pond. So I've got a good organic alfalfa. And you could use alfalfa in there too. The problem is it gets hard to feed the grain after a while because they get so woodpecked. So a good sized pond. And then they don't want baking hot sun, but they want really a bright spot.
Yeah, so maybe morning sun, but then lots of light.
That is perfect.
To have it done.
And if the plant stays happy, I don't think you'll get attacked with bugs so much. But if they get stressed out, the aphids just move in on them. So be ready to actually blast, either squish the aphid with your fingers or blast them off with the hose spray. And if you knock an aphid off with a hose,
I've got to ask.
because they're so soft. So I think if you're trying to keep it, you have to
I thought that was a different one. Well, I have this, and I just wanted to ask him what he said it was. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Isn't that pretty?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
yeah. You get the stuff that's all set to spray and everything. So yeah, neem oil will get rid of those bugs for you. Just make sure the second number is higher than the first number. So like something like 5, 10, 10. Any numbers like that. Because, the second number is what makes the flowers happen. You want that. Yeah, man.
The other thing is, oh, sorry. The other thing is, New Zealand flags, the winter.
Oh, it got massacred.
Do you think they'll come back?
Well, mine are, but I actually covered some of mine, and they even died to the ground, which is so rare. And but all mine aren't coming back, but it takes. It'll be this big by the end of summer.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
It's way too big.
I paid $90 for this guardsman. It's dark red. I really wanted it. I finally talked Mary to let me get it. It's this big right now, but it is alive. I only got one leaf standing up, but I'm not giving up.
Someday you're gonna go, oh my God, that's so big.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
All right, thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're so welcome. Yeah, there's a cover you could get called Frost Protect. Comes from Charlie's greenhouse. And you're only supposed to cover the plant when it's really cold, but I leave them on all winter. And they have a cinch cord and everything. And that makes 8 degrees difference. So, and it lets the light and the air and water.
What's the name again?
It's called Frost Protect from Charlie's greenhouse.
Where's Charlie's greenhouse?
Up in Mount Vernon, but you can go online and look at them.
Thank
So
you.
I use those.
Frost Protect.
I like them.
Yeah.
They're kind of flimsy they rip and they're expensive, and that's a pain, but they're worth trying.
Especially if you have a $90 plant.
Yeah, you're not
Can you
kidding.
reuse those?
Yeah, you should be able to reuse them. You know, they kind of start, after
start to
2 or 3
deteriorate,
years, they
yeah.
start deteriorating. And it's a
Thank
pain.
you.
Great. Okay, good luck with those. See ya.
I have a red flowering fern that gets about that tall, but in previous years it's gotten powdery mildew. It looks beautiful in the beginning and then it gets powdery mildew. And what can I do? Do I just get rid of the plant?
No, you could spray, you can make your own powdery mildew control.
Okay.
You gotta do it the minute you see the powdery mildew start.
Okay.
Powdery mildew is the only fungus that lives on the outside of the plant. You can kill it. Not like black spot.
Yeah.
So, you can, if you're in an emergency, 2 teaspoons of baking soda in a quart of water and a few drops of dish detergent.
Okay, so baking soda, soap or dish detergent in a quart of water and then just spray it.
4 teaspoons. And works like a charm. Or you could buy neem oil and just spray neem oil the minute you see the first sign. Either one will work.
But you don't want to do it beforehand. There's no
Doesn't do any
point.
good.
It's not going to do any good. It won't prevent it.
No.
It won't. Okay.
But also, it means your plant's getting stressed out. So it could be plants under stress get powdery mildew 100 times worse.
Yeah.
So I think it's not getting enough water, or it's too much, or it's in poorly drained soil. It's one
Could
of
be in
those
poorly
things.
drained soil.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But at least you can control that powdery
But
mildew.
nothing else right around it gets powdery mildew. So
Yeah, some plants are more susceptible.
Is red flowering fern susceptible or not particularly? Everybody else
I've
is.
hardly ever seen it get it. We do a lot of it at SU because it's so attractive. And
Yeah,
it's
it's so beautiful.
So I just think that plant isn't happy where it is. It might be, you know, they like full sun, but not baking hot full sun.
Well, it's actually in a place that's probably pretty good for it, but it somehow got powdery mildew,
Yeah,
and so
once they get
it
it.
keeps on getting it.
So be ready with that spray. The
Okay.
first sign of it, like we had some roses that we just liked.
Yeah.
They were really susceptible.
Uh-huh.
We sprayed them every week,
Okay.
and it controlled them.
Okay. I'm going to just repeat this so that I can remember it. 2 tablespoons of baking soda. 2 teaspoons. 2 teaspoons baking soda in a quart of water, and a little bit of dish detergent.
That's it.
Okay. Now I can go write it down.
All right, good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good luck.
Tell me what this is again.
Oh, it's called Brunera.
I have 2 of these. I just bought some several years, maybe a couple of years ago. I just bought some perennials. I didn't know. I just liked it, but I couldn't remember the name. And then, do I cut this off, or do I
Yeah,
just?
it'll start looking bad after a while, and you
Uh-huh.
just cut that off. And this will, as long as it's in shade, this one is called Jack Frost, I think. And there's also Looking Glass. There's some different ones. And as long as they're in shade, they have beauty all summer long with those great leaves and everything.
Yeah. So the flowers will stop after a while.
Yeah, they quit. They're just a spring bloomer.
Okay. Well, they're so sweet.
Oh, I love them.
Well, you know, I'm going to leave this here for you.
That's a good idea.
It can have a little slow death here. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you.
We just enjoyed this.
Oh,
Ooh la la percent.
well, bye. See ya.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Cisco.
Oh, hey, that was fun.
Yeah, we loved it.
I never signed the book for that woman.
Oh, she's right here. It was
Good,
Amelia.
good. Running through that
Yeah.
quick. Oh, wait, whose book is that? And then I'm signing it.
get any of your stuff back down? We could probably use this little cart over here and make it a little